Hey YouTube, how's it going here? Thanks for joining us here at the Fantasy Football Profits. Today we're going to do our Week 8 Start Sit Help video. And we're just going to go through generally all the games and help get an idea of what we think these players can do. Now if you want specific advice, because it is very hard to compare a player from one game to a player from another game, make sure to leave a comment. We'll give you a breakdown on those players and some information as to who you should play and who you shouldn't. Of course, if you guys like our content, if you like what we do and you want more, make sure to support the site, like the video, subscribe, share, and that will definitely help bring in more revenue for us and help us to continue to grow this and do this more. And so again, if you like what we're doing, make sure to support it. And then the other thing is that we're posting this on Wednesday, and more information will be updated as the week goes on, so make sure to check out our video on Friday, which is our daily fantasy video, and that should have a little bit more updated information as well. It's also very fun. I know that daily fantasy has been growing a lot, so you can check that out as well. Anyways, let's quit wasting time and we can just get right into it and talk about our first game.
So let's look at the Texans versus the Dolphins here. So let's look at Deshaun Watson in this game versus Miami, giving up the fifth fewest points to quarterbacks. A couple other things to consider with Watson out there. He's dealing with a chest injury, also injuries to Fuller and Kiki Coty, although Fuller seems to be close to 100% at this point. Now, the downside of, the defense there is the Houston defense is actually starting to play a lot better. As that defense is improving, his need to throw the ball has decreased. In fact, you can see the correspondence. He had 4 consecutive games through over 300 yards. They're playing from behind off one of their closer games. Well, the last 2 games, that defense only allowed 13 points to 7 points. Subsequently, his yardage have dropped there. And so the Houston Texans defense improving is great for their teams of football, but it hurts fantasy owners that have Deshaun Watson. Just a side note here, unrelated to Start Sit video, in the preseason we went out there and we actually said that we know everybody's jacked about this guy. In a lot of mock drafts, he went number 2 behind Aaron Rodgers. In our videos, we kind of predicted a slight regression. He said he's not a tier 1 quarterback, and I think we're seeing that right now. We really like this guy, don't get me wrong, just don't think that he's a tier 1 quarterback out there. This week you can start him, but he'd be outside of the top 10. Let's look at Brock Osweiler in this one. He's played surprisingly well for the Dolphins there. Now, the Texans defense started slow, as we said, but they're starting to get pressure on that quarterback, and Watt is starting to look like his old self again. Now, the first 4 weeks, they were vulnerable to quarterbacks, but the last 3, they've shut down a lot of quarterbacks. That Texans defense has done that. Now, someone go on paper and say, well, wait a second, that wasn't against very good quarterbacks. They weren't great quarterbacks that they shut down. But here's Brock Osweiler. Let's be honest, he's not a great quarterback. He's not even a good quarterback. You need to sit Brock Osweiler versus the Texans, who give the 14th fewest points to quarterbacks. Another note on Brock there is Wilson and Stills are out for the game. He's lacking a lot of weapons there, so there's really no motivation to start him in this one. As far as running backs go, look at Lamar Miller, playing the Dolphins, who allow the 4th most points to running backs. He finally broke out last week, had 22 carries, 100 yards, and a touchdown. Minus that game, it's been a very disappointing year for Lamar Miller. Here's the thing, though. He's a clear-cut starting running back, which in fantasy football, that's really half the battle, is find a back that's going to get carries. So that volume keeps him a safe start this week as a running back, too. You got Frank Gore in this one. Frank Gore is still getting carries. This guy, he's really been productive even at the age of 35. He's not getting enough carries. He's not playing effectively enough to be started. The only way I'd consider starting him is unless something happens to Drake. Kenyon Drake goes down, then he could be a guy that you would start. And of course, then that brings us to Kenyon Drake. Last 3 games in a row, he's starting to look explosive and powerful again, doing the things that we felt like he was going to do this year and why we were big on him. During that 3-game stretch, he's having 7 yards per carry. He's added 15 catches and 2 touchdowns. He's trending the right direction. Now, he plays a Houston defense that's tough against the run, but they are vulnerable to running backs that catch the ball at the backfield, which is exactly what Drake does. So I think this is a good matchup for him as a low running back 2 or a flex start. Then you got DeAndre Hopkins. Look at the wide receivers there. He's a must-start wide receiver 1. Now, the Dolphins are tough against the pass, and he's going to have a tough quarterback matchup in this one. Doesn't matter. He's a must-start stud every week. Even in the down weeks, the last 2 weeks, where they haven't had a lot of numbers, he's found a way to find the end zone, so start him. That brings us to Will Fuller. So Will Fuller was a guy that during a stretch there was on fire. I think he had like 9 touchdowns in like 7 games. It was crazy. But then he had some hamstring issues, and Kiki Coty's presence there, I think, cooled him a little bit. Well, now his hamstring's getting healthier, and Kiki Coty's most likely going to miss this game with an injury. I think he's going to rebound. You can start him as a wide receiver 3. And then, of course, Kiki, we mentioned, most likely out with a hamstring injury. Let's look at the wide receivers for the Dolphins. I would sit all of them. The only one I would consider is Danny Amendola. Playing Houston gives up the 10th fewest points to wide receivers. Stills and Wilson are out. And so what that means is even though it's not a great matchup, he's not a great wide receiver, the volume is going to be there. He'll get huge targets. They've got to throw the ball to somebody. 12 to 15 targets in this game would not be a stretch for him at all. I would start him, but only in PPR leagues that are 12 teams or larger as a wide receiver 3 or a flex play. As far as tight ends go in this one, I would sit all tight ends. Maybe you could start Mike Gesicki in the future. He's looking better. This is a guy who was great in the preseason, but he's just not there yet. I would start Kaya Fairbairn, and then I would sit the Miami's kicker. I would start the Texans defense, and I would sit the Miami's defense in this one.
All right, sounds good. All right, so now here we come to the Eagles-Jaguars game, and we'll just start off with the quarterbacks. Put simply, you should start Carson Wentz, and you should sit Blake Bortles, and here's why. One, Blake Bortles / Cody Kessler, you should sit both of them. Bortles just got benched, and then Kessler came in. We're not really sure how much playing time each of these guys is going to get, and it didn't even matter how much they get because that offense is awful right now. The Jaguars are averaging just 11.5 points a game. That's awful. And so make sure to sit them, of course. And then Carson Wentz, I understand that Jacksonville gives with the third least fantasy points to quarterbacks in the NFL right now. They are shutting down QBs, but don't let that scare you. Carson Wentz has been on fire. Mind you that it took a few games for him to come back as he's still getting used to that ACL injury. But over the last 4 games, he's averaging 40 passing attempts, 311 yards. He's thrown 0 interceptions, and he's averaged a quarterback rating of 114. He's been on fire. I cannot find a reason to say that you should bench him, so make sure to start Carson Wentz unless you happen to have Aaron Rodgers or someone else, but I really doubt that's the case. Another thing that bodes well for him, and this transitions us into the running backs, is that Jay Ajayi is out. Wendell Smallwood and Corey Clement are both banged up. There's both notes on their health a little bit. Of course, it sounds like both of them are going to play, but that backfield is pretty messed up right now. Jacksonville goes with the 9th fewest fantasy points to running backs, which is insane when you consider the running backs they've gone against. They've gone to Jacksonville has stopped Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt, Lamar Miller, Sony Michel. They've gone against some really good backs and still held them to the 9th fewest points in the NFL. So I don't imagine that Wendell Smallwood and Corey Clement are going to be too effective in that game. So I probably wouldn't start them unless you're really desperate. But again, if you're thinking you are desperate and you think you may need to start them, leave a comment. We'll talk about it. But on the other side, remember that Leonard Fournette is still out, Carlos Hyde and TJ Yeldon. Now, this is kind of interesting. In a standard league, I might go Carlos Hyde. He's had 4 rushing touchdowns, but only on 3.4 yards per carry. He's kind of a bruising back. He's almost kind of like a fullback in that sort of way. And that's the value that he holds, especially in the red zone. But TJ Yeldon, if you're in a PPR league, he is the PPR guy. I'm far more likely to be excited to start TJ Yeldon. He's got 30 receptions and 4 receiving touchdowns so far. He's on pace for 70 catches and 9 receiving TDs this year. He's a PPR stud. Him and James White are these guys who have kind of just not a lot of value as far as their running ability, but they are so effective in the passing game. And so make sure to, if you're looking for a kind of a deep bench guy or a guy to continue replacing Fournette, Yeldon is great in PPR leagues. But that's that. Now we'll move on to the wide receivers. Alshon Jeffrey's a must start. He's got 4 touchdowns in 4 games this season. 3 of those 4 games he's been dominant, and in 1 game he got pretty much shut down. When you look at it, he played Tennessee. He had 8 catches, 105 yards, and a touchdown. Played the Giants. He had 8 catches, 74 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then he played Carolina. He had 7 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. The only game he didn't perform well was against Minnesota. He had 8 targets, 2 catches, 39 yards, and no scores. But that Minnesota defense is first in 3rd down stopping percentage or whatever.
Conversion rate or whatever.
Conversion rate.
I don't know, yeah.
And they're really sharpening things up. Of course, we know that Xavier Rhodes is one of the best, if not the best, cornerback in the NFL. Harrison Smith over top. And so you can understand that. The other 3 games, though, he's had 4 touchdowns. He's looked great. Jacksonville does give up the fewest points to wide receivers, but with that running back situation being as bad as it is and Carson Wentz being as good as he is, you imagine they're going to throw the ball a lot. I think that this is going to be a good game for Jeffrey. Nelson Aguilar, he hasn't scored since week 2, and he's failed to even gain 50 yards in 5 of the last 7 games that he's played in. The Eagles face, again, the number 1 passing defense in the Eagles this week, so I don't like Aguilar. I like Jeffrey, but maybe you might have to start him. We'll move on to the Jacksonville wide receivers, Dede Westbrook, Keelan Cole, DJ Chark, and Dante Moncrief. I'm just going to say bench them all. That quarterback play is so awful. All of them have really failed to impress this year, and it's not necessarily their fault, but the quarterback play is just not there. I don't really know any other way to say it. That's pretty simple. We look at Zach Ertz now. Jacksonville gives up the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends, but 3 of the last 4 games, Zach Ertz has had over 110 yards, and he scored 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games. He's also averaging 9 receptions a game. Even though the matchup's tough, I have a hard time saying sit Zach Ertz, especially at such a position at tight end that just has no talent. I think you have to start him. We go to the other side, James O'Shaughnessy. I hope I'm saying that right. He's yet to score. He's yet to have more than 30 receiving yards in a game, and he's yet to have more than 3 catches in a game. Absolutely sit him. He has no value. Jake Elliott. Moving on to the kickers now. Jake Elliott gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to kickers. He's averaging 8.5 points per game since Wentz's return. Wentz has returned and really picked up that offense a little bit, and Elliott's been a pretty reasonable kicker, so I like that. We talk about kickers can have added value when the team can pass the ball well but not run the ball well. That seems to be Philadelphia right now, so I like starting Jake Elliott. On the other side, Josh Lambo, the last 3 weeks, he has totaled 4 points and attempted 0 field goals. Attempted 0 field goals in 4 weeks. He's a sit. That offense is too bad. Of course, the Jaguars give up the 4th most fantasy points to defenses, so you absolutely should start the Eagles against them. And then the Jaguars, Philly gives up just 6.5 fantasy points per game to defenses that face them, so that's actually kind of on the other end where they don't give up a lot. So Jacksonville, they're very good, but they have a tough matchup, and so I'm going to say start them if you don't have another good option, right? Kind of on the fence on that one. It really depends on what you have on your team. So that's Philadelphia versus Jacksonville, who you should start and sit.
Okay, so we'll get to the next game. Before we do, I got to make a note here, okay? We are at times wrong, but I think we've been pretty solid in a lot of our predictions, especially in the preseason. One of the guys that we were really warning everybody against last year and even in the summertime was Blake Bortles. And a few of you guys out there hated it. You said, no, we're wrong. You went on and on and on. I think we're seeing it now, okay? Yeah. And so just want to throw that out there for all you guys that thought we were crazy on the Blake Bortles predictions. So let's get to our next game. Let's look at the Bears versus the Jets. Look at Sam Darnold. He's had a decent rookie season. He's had probably, though, more downs than ups, and that's typical for a rookie quarterback. He faces a very good Chicago defense in Chicago. Sit him, don't even think about it. That brings us to Mitch Trubisky. Now, he's had 3 weeks in a row that he's had good fantasy numbers. Now, he's still making some mistakes that young quarterbacks are going to make, but he's improving, and Nagy's offense is improving. So I think there's some hope there. Now, why am I starting to trust him as a fantasy quarterback? The biggest reason why I'm starting to trust Mitch Trubisky is his legs. Averaging over 60 yards rushing the last 3 games. So I think I would start him as a quarterback around the 12 to 15 range based on your scoring system. I do have concerns at his production this game, but mostly because I think it's going to be a lower scoring game there in Chicago. Let's get the running backs. Jordan Howard. He did find the end zone last week, but he's only had 1 catch in 3 games in that Nagy offense. That's not a good, it doesn't bode well for him there. And also, he's just simply not a good fit for Nagy's offense. A lot of people in the offseason felt like that was going to be an issue. It certainly seemed to be playing out that way. So for me, this week, Howard's a running back 3 in standards. I would sit in PPRs. That brings us to Tariq Cohen. So a few weeks back, we said that he's in every week starting PPR leagues as a running back 2 or flex. He's really solidified that point by his play recently. He's had 3 TDs in 3 weeks. During that same 3 weeks, he's had 22 catches for 287 receiving yards. So this guy is a very great PPR option out there. He's a must-start in PPRs as a running back 2 or flex. In standards, you got to lower him down to about an RB3. Now, we're going to get to the wide receivers. One thing I want to point out there, people ask for advice. We love to give it. But a lot of people are looking for a wide receiver lock, a stud that they can trust week in and week out, but you're looking for him in the bargain rack. And here's what I mean by that. The wide receivers that we're going to talk about are like so many. They're going to run hot and cold. They're going to be inconsistent. If you want a wide receiver that you can trust, that's a lock, that's going to have great production, you have to be willing to pay for it. You have to pay for it either through drafting a a wide receiver, or you got to trade for it. Everybody wants Adam Thielen production, but they want it as out of a wide receiver 3 or 4, and you just simply can't get that. And so I think that happens a lot. An example I think about is like Boyd, a wide receiver for the Bengals. Guy's in a great position. Often weeks he's going to put you up decent numbers as a wide receiver 3, but he will be inconsistent because he's not a top tier wide receiver. So just remember that. Brings us to Robbie Anderson. Bears give up the 4th most points to wide receivers. You saw 10 targets last game. Somebody's going to have to get targeted a lot in this one. So I think that he does have a lot of skills. We have seen this guy can explode, but he can also disappear for stretches. But I think you could start as a wide receiver 3. Then there's Quincy Enunwa. Sounds to me like he's probably going to be out at least for one more week. And I would sit all their Jets wide receivers in this one. Now, Allen Robinson was brought in, paid a lot of money, being their one wideout. He's playing the Jets that give him 3rd most points to wide receivers. Now, he did have touchdowns in back-to-back games, but he hasn't cracked 100 yards yet. He hasn't been great, but he is their number 1 wide receiver, so I would start him as a wide receiver 3 in this matchup. Brings us to Taylor Gabriel. He's one that a lot of people were trending last week. He disappointed against New England. That's going to happen after 2 good weeks. I still think he's got value there as a wide receiver in this offense. But in a lower scoring game, which I think this is going to be, I would probably sit him. Then there's Anthony Miller. I would sit. He's not playing well enough to start. He needs an injury. He needs to improve his play first. A lot of things need to happen before he could be considered. As far as tight ends go, you got Trey Burton playing the Jets. They give the 7th fewest points to tight ends, but he's Mitch's favorite target there. Mitch Trubisky loves to target his tight ends. Plus, tight ends thrive in Nagy's offense. So I would start as a low-end tight end 1, but the matchup kind of temper your expectation this one because the matchup's more difficult. Then there's Chris Herndon, tight end for the Jets, a rookie. He's starting to look good. He's playing better. He's somebody to keep an eye on, but he's not proven enough yet to trust. I'll sit him. Brings us to kickers. Jason Myers got a strong leg. He's kicked really well, but in this one I would sit it. Playing in Chicago, there's a chance the Bears could shut out the Jets, so I would sit him. I would start Cody Parquet in this one, the Bears kicker, unless you have some better options out there. As far as defenses go, I would start Chicago. They have a great matchup this week, and I would sit the Jets.
All right, sounds good. All right, now, so we come to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, we're going to start off with the quarterbacks, and why not go Jameis Winston? Jameis Winston goes against Cincinnati, who gives up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. On top of that, he's thrown for 760 combined yards in the last 2 games. He looks good as far as fantasy goes. Now, he's thrown 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, so he doesn't necessarily look good as a regular quarterback, but as a fantasy quarterback, he's certainly getting the job done. On top of that, the Bengals give up 300.7 passing yards a game and 29 points per game, so I think this is going to be a huge, huge week for Jameis Winston. He's definitely a guy to start. And I also think that Andy Dalton on the other side, he's a good guy to start. He plays Tampa Bay, who gives up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. In 5 of the last 6 games, Tampa Bay has allowed 330 passing yards and 2 TDs. On top of that, Dalton is coming off of a tough schedule. He's performed well. He's top 5 in the NFL, I believe top 5, top 6 for passing touchdowns, and that's despite playing teams like Baltimore, Carolina, Atlanta, some different tough matchups. And so Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston, I think this could be a bit of a shootout. I like to start both of them. I don't think that they're amazing options, but I think they're good options.
Can I make a note on that there?
Yeah,
we've already had a lot of you guys that have messaged me and said that you're worried about Dalton. Last week you started him and he was a major disappointment. Put your fears at rest. There's a couple of things that happened in that game. One, early in the first half there, he actually was on pace to have a good game. Dalton was on pace for about 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. But then what happens early in the third quarter, Kansas City gets out in front. Before you know it, that game's 31-7. They didn't really run the ball that effectively because they needed to throw the ball. Play action wasn't there. That allowed Kansas City's defense to become one-dimensional. They would play the nickel-dime packages, blitz a little bit more, and that shut things down. A couple things. One, Tampa Bay is not going to get that out that in front quickly like Kansas City did. And 2, Tampa Bay's defense is just simply brutal. And so just to put your fears at ease, you can trust Andy Dalton this week. I think if you look at it, he was a victim of game flow. Here's the other thing. They were playing in Kansas City, and now they're at home. So because we've had a lot of people that have actually messaged me saying, man, I got burnt last week. Andy Dalton, can I trust him? I think you can absolutely trust him.
Yeah, exactly. And then one thing is that Kansas City has an extremely underrated defense.
They do, yeah.
I found it was like the last 3 or 4 games they've gotten like 17 sacks or something.
Yeah.
They've been really getting after the quarterback. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. We'll move on to the running backs now. Let's go to Tampa. Ronald Jones Jr. and Peyton Barber. I don't think that people should be starting either of them. Peyton Barber seems to be the guy who's getting most of the carries. He seems to be the leading running back, but he hasn't been very effective. He is questionable and struggling with injury. Ronald Jones Jr. Did score a touchdown last week, but I don't trust either of them. I don't, especially if they both play. If Peyton Barber doesn't play, I could maybe see taking a shot on on Ronald Jones Jr. I could see it because he's the only running back in that offense. But if Peyton Barber does play, then it's like definite stay away from both of them. On the other side, we see Joe Mixon. I like Joe Mixon. He's the leading ball carrier. He's the man in that offense right now. He also catches the ball to the backfield and has PPR value. He's increased his yards per carry to 4.6 yards per carry this season. That's impressive. He scored 3 TDs with 0 fumbles. Top of that, Tampa Bay gives the 12th most fantasy points to running backs, so that's good, not great. This should be a good week for Mixon. I really do like this. He goes up against a bad defense, and I think that's going to help quite a bit. Again, you go from playing Kansas City's good defense to Tampa Bay that just seems awful right now. His yards per carry is up. He's catching the ball in the backfield. He's not competing for carries. I don't know. I like him a lot this week. We'll move on to the wide receivers, though, now. Of course, we'll go A.J. Green. A.J. Green is averaging 12 targets, 7 catches on 105 yards a game over the last 3 games. Tampa Bay gives up the 2nd most points to receivers. This is a match made in heaven. You got to start A.J. Green. Just simple as that. I can't find a reason not to. We look at Tyler Boyd. When he gets 7 receptions or more, he's averaging 96 yards and 1 touchdown a game. So like you talked about, he's very high and very low. Sometimes he gets the targets and sometimes he doesn't. But when you look at Tampa Bay giving up the 2nd most points to receivers and the fact that I think this could be a high-scoring game, I don't see any reason why Boyd shouldn't be able to get the targets he needs. I think he could have a good game as well. So I might start him as a wide receiver 3 or maybe a flex play. Of course, Mike Evans is a must start. I don't think I need to say anything other than he's a must start. Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson has not scored a receiving touchdown since week 2. I don't think that I would find myself starting him or putting him in my roster. If I would, it would be a wide receiver 3 or a flex play, and I wouldn't feel comfortable about it. I'd feel kind of desperate. And so certainly if you're thinking about starting Deshaun Jackson, look at your lineup and try to find someone else, and I think that you could probably find a better option if you just take the time to look for one. We go to the tight ends now. What about Cincinnati Bengals tight end C.J. Uzomah? We look at Tampa Bay gives up the most fantasy points to tight ends, and Uzomah pulled in a touchdown last week. On top of that, because Croft is out, because Eiferd's out, he is the guy right now, and so I don't know, this could be a good week for him. I would normally say that I don't like him. He is a 3rd-string tight end finally coming in, that makes me uncomfortable. But the tight end position is so shallow, right? Like there's so little talent there that I could say, yeah, if you're desperate, he is an option. He is a plug and play. But I would look for someone else out there. On the other side, we say O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. O.J. Howard, he gets more targets or receptions. He gets more yards. Brate has found the end zone one more time this year. They really just take away from each other statistically, and this is why I feel like that's another situation. I feel like I find myself saying this a lot, whereas like 2 players who I can't start either of them because they're both good enough to harm each other's stats, but not good enough to be an actual legitimate starter. While Cincinnati gives up the 4th most points to tight ends, neither of those guys seems to really separate themselves or show any form of consistency that I can trust at tight end. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's just...
Actually, I like Howard a lot. I think Brate's touchdown was when Howard was injured. He had the MCL sprain, missed some time there. I think he was trending in the right direction. I like Howard quite a bit. He's not, I don't say a tier 1 tight end, but I think he's a guy that you could play.
Well, I certainly like Howard too. I completely agree with him.
The problem with it is that the position's so thin now. It's so hard to find productive tight ends, And then a guy like Gronkowski, who's considered a lock, who's having a really off year. It's just a weak position.
Yeah, it is a weak position, and you're right. I liked Howard. I had him ranked higher than a lot of people like Ryan and maybe even you at the beginning of the season. But yeah, with things, I just don't trust him. Although you're right, it's such a thin position as far as talent goes. I wouldn't be surprised if I found myself just saying, fine, like I have to. And you could certainly be in a worse position. He has high upside. He has the athleticism. He's a big, fast guy. So, but let's go to the tight ends. Kicker Randy Bullock, don't play him. Kicker Chandler Catanzaro, I hope I'm saying that right, last week for Tampa Bay. He hit the game-winning 59-yard field goal. Cincinnati gives the 9th most points to kickers. Well, I don't think he's a fantastic kicker. If you're looking for a plug-and-play, this might be a good week to do it. Of course, coaches are probably very confident in him after last week, and that bodes well. I know that one play, I hate to base information on a guy off of one play, but at kicker, it's so very high and low that one play is honestly probably enough confidence to let him kick the ball a little bit more this week, so that might help. We move on now to the defenses. Cincinnati's defense has had more games of negative or 0 fantasy points than they have had positive fantasy point games. So that's a pretty clear don't play them. And then, of course, we look at Tampa Bay's defense. They're not getting after the quarterback. They're not forcing turnovers. They're just not worth playing. They're very ineffective this year.
They fired the defensive coordinator this week. They're a mess.
They are an absolute mess.
And then to make things worse, they lost their linebacker, what's his name, Quan Alexander this week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a defense that was the worst just got worse, if that's possible.
Yeah, so that's that for the games. Anything you guys say on that, Rob?
Nope.
All right.
So let's look at the Seahawks and the Lions. Start with Russell Wilson. 1 week he was shut out. But other than that, the other 5, if you look at their 5 games, he had 13 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions. He's having actually a very good and a very quiet year. Faced Detroit, gives up the 15th fewest points to quarterbacks. Last week, Brock Osweiler looked good against him. I think Wilson is a guy that you can start. I think he's a good play this week. This guy's very talented. He finds ways to win. Matthew Stafford, after a terrible week 1, he's really recovered well. Since then, he's had 11 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. That's a great ratio. He's playing at home. Now, he is facing an underrated Seattle defense. I say underrated because they lost so many guys in the offseason, but the defense actually surprisingly starting to play pretty well. With that said, I still think you need to play him. I think Matthew Stafford is a quarterback 12 to 14 range this week. Let's look at running backs. Chris Carson plays the Lions to give the 6th most points to running backs. Would be a great matchup. The only downside of Chris Carson, he's sharing carries with Mike Davis and Penny. That lowers his value to about a running back 3 or flex in large leagues. Rashad Penny, I think he's a guy that you need to watch. He's a rookie drafted in the 1st round ahead of Sony Michel. A lot of talent there. He's had 18 carries the last 2 games. His yards per carry has been on the rise. He's a sleeper candidate, somebody to watch, but unless Davis or Carson goes down, he can't be trusted to start there. Right now, his volume is simply not there. And then Mike Davis, you need to sit him. With Penny and Carson in the mix, I don't trust his volume. And then it brings us to Detroit. Kerryon Johnson, fallen in love with this guy. I think he's very good. 6.4 yards per carry for the year. He's using the passing game. He's become the clear-cut running back 1 in that offense. Yes, Blunt has had a few goal line touchdowns he stole from him. But he's a safe play as a running back 2 or a flex play. And if you're in a dynasty league and you own this guy, you got to love it. This guy looks really good. I'm excited for his future. He went off on Miami. He hasn't had a bad week. You have to go back to week 1 to find a week that he struggled. Then LeGarrette Blount, he's a TD machine. I'm sorry, let's probably take that back. I wouldn't call him machine. Maybe I would say TD dependent at this point. He gets goal line carries, but his 2.9 yards per carry has been bad. Johnson's development really makes him a guy that you need to sit. Unless he gets a touchdown, he has no value, and I hate to depend on that, honestly. So as far as wide receivers go, you have Golden Tate. He had a hot start. He's coming back down to earth. I would start as a wide receiver 3 or flex in PPRs. In standard leagues, he has less value. Seattle gives up the 11th fewest points to wide receivers, and once again, that defense is doing better than we would expect with the losses that they have had this year. Marvin Jones is the clear number 3 wide receiver behind Tate and Galladay for targets. Those targets are getting lower and lower. I would sit him. Kenny Galladay, I would start as a wide receiver 3. Now, this takes us to Seattle's wide receivers. Let's look at Tyler Lockett. He had 5 touchdowns in 6 weeks. Now, he plays Detroit. That gives up the 4th fewest points to wide receivers. But that's because they haven't faced any good wide receivers. That's why it's important to go in. You can look at that initial stat and say, wow, they don't give up any points to wide receivers. But here's who they faced. Okay, first of all, they faced Devontae Adams. When he did, he destroyed him. But other than that, they faced San Francisco, Dallas, the Jets, and then they did face New England, but that was when Edelman was still suspended and Gordon had just arrived. They haven't faced any good wideouts, so that's why that number is so good. I think it's a bit deceiving. I think this week they do give up some points to those wide receivers for Seattle. So I would say Lockett could be started as a wide receiver 3, and then Doug Baldwin. That knee is getting better. It's not going to be 100% this year, but he's looking healthier. He's Wilson's favorite target and best weapon. He had a nice line last game. He went 6 catches, 91 yards against Oakland. I would start him as a wide receiver 2. I would sit all tight ends in this game. I would start Prater and Janikowski, and I would sit both defenses. Anything you want to add or say? Or?
No, I like what you were talking about Rashad Penny. In fact, I just watched an interview. It was Colin Cowherd was talking with Russell Wilson, and he was saying, he was asking Russell, like, hey, are you offended that they used to be a defensive team and now all of a sudden Seattle's turning into this running team? And he's like, don't you wish they'd give you a little more attention? And Russell Wilson's like, no, I love it. And this is, the identity of the team. And they're just talking all about how they're loving to run the ball lately. And I think that bodes really well for Rashad Penny going forward. This isn't just a couple of games where they've had to run the ball. Like, this is something that Seattle wants to do going forward. And again, because they took him with a fairly high draft pick, they clearly have at least somewhat faith or hope that he can do it. And so, yeah, I definitely like him going forward as a guy to keep your eye and to pay attention to for sure.
All right.
All right, so now we come to the Denver-Kansas City game. This is an interesting game. So first off, we'll talk about the quarterbacks as usual. Quarterback Case Keenum, he's a bit of a gunslinger. He's attempting like about 36 passes a game. He's got good weapons in Demaryius Thomas and Sanders and Sutton. On top of that, the Broncos have the 4th best pass blocking efficiency rating in the NFL this season. He's got the weapons around him, but I don't trust him and I wouldn't start him. Kansas City have 17 sacks, 8 turnovers, and 2 touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. They started very slow at the beginning of the year and they've really picked things up recently. On top of that, Case Keenum has actually, I think that Case Keenum has been a little bit boosted by the fact that that defense is playing well and that he's not pressured all the time. I think that Kansas City is the one team that can go there, or that can go play Denver and can put up points and force them to throw the ball, force them to be a little bit one-dimensional and turnover. I think this is going to be a bad week for Case Keenum. I wouldn't start him. We go to the other side, Patrick Mahomes. I don't know. Last time they played in Denver, he threw for 304 yards and a touchdown. He played well. On top of that, Patrick Mahomes is on pace for a total of 55 touchdowns, combined rushing, receiving. That is insane numbers right now. I can't find a reason not to play him. While Denver gives up the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterback, Patrick Mahomes is the hottest quarterback they have played. Went from last game in Denver to this game in Kansas City. Absolutely start Patrick Mahomes. Now we look at the running backs, Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay. Royce Freeman is marked as questionable and is competing with Lindsay for touches, and to be quite honest, he's losing that battle. Lindsay seems to be stepping up Phillip Lindsay and saying like, hey, this is mine. Lindsay is the receiving back and has done a good job. I guess has done a good job in the passing game. I don't know a better way to say that. It sounds so unintelligent. But he's also running a little bit better. He had 90 rushing yards last game. He's looking effective both on the ground and in the air. While Kansas City gives up the 2nd most points to running backs this season, Lindsay has 5.8 yards per carry. I would probably start Phillip Lindsay. Really at running back position, because this isn't a hugely confident start. It depends on what the rest of your roster looks like and what you have to work with, but I like Lindsay. I would probably sit Freeman and go with Phillip over him. Of course, Kareem Hunt is an absolute must start. That's a no-brainer. We look at Demaryius Thomas, and 2 of the last 3 games have been very good for Thomas. He was slow last week. So he kind of got slowed last week due to that huge blowout over Arizona, but in the 2 weeks before that, he played well and had good games. Emmanuel Sanders seems to be emerging as the #1 wide receiver. I think you got to start Emmanuel Sanders. The last few weeks, he's had 2 100-yard games and 2 touchdowns the last few weeks. He's really stepped up and looked good. I think that Emmanuel Sanders is a must start. Again, especially when you look at the fact that I'm predicting, I think Kansas City is going to put up quite a few points on Denver, despite the fact that Denver's defense has been so good. On the other side, we see Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is a must start. He's had 22 targets, 14 catches, 210 yards, and 4 touchdowns in just the last 2 weeks. He is so hot right now. He's such a big playmaker. You got to start him. And then we look at Sammy Watkins. I probably wouldn't start him unless you're looking for a flex or a 3rd-string wideout and you're kind of slim on talent right now. He doesn't seem to be scoring well. Denver gives up the 10th least points to receivers. He hasn't had a great start. So I'm not a big fan of him. As far as Denver tight ends go, heck, most of you probably don't even know the names of the tight ends for Denver's team, and so that's a clear don't start. Obviously, you got to start Travis Kelce. He seems to be the best tight end in the NFL right now. He is so hot. He's had so many 100-yard games. He keeps finding the end zone. I think he has 3 touchdowns this year. So, of course, start Travis Kelce. We move on to the kickers right now. Brandon McManus, he's an average kicker with an average matchup. I think he's an average start. I might look for better, but I wouldn't try too hard. You can start him if you have to. Harrison Butker, he's a great kicker. He's kicked very well. That offense is super hot right now. He's got a great matchup. Denver gives up a lot of points to kickers. I think he's a great start. Definitely make sure to start Harrison Butker if you have the opportunity. So now we come to the defense. Denver's defense has 11 sacks, 6 turnovers, and 2 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. However, Kansas City gives up the fewest points to defenses. So the question is, what's going to win out, the good offense or the good defense in that game? That's a bit of a toss-up. That is a really high risk, high reward situation. I'm not going to pretend to be 100% confident on my answer, but I'm going to probably say that Kansas City wins out in this game. I might start Denver. That being said, Denver is too good to sit. I don't imagine you're going to go in free agency and find a better option. I don't know what you think on that, Rob.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, if there's something out there, and it may not be, usually it's picked apart at this point, waiver wire.
Yeah. And then I talked about Kansas City over the last 5 weeks. They've had 17 sacks, 8 turnovers, and 2 touchdowns. Well, over the last 2 weeks, they've had 9 of those sacks, 7 of those turnovers, and both of those touchdowns. Denver may give up the 11th fewest fantasy points to defenses, but I love Kansas City this week. You've got to start that defense.
Yep. All right. I'll give you credit, by the way. Beginning there, you had Kelsey ranked ahead of Gronkowski, unlike a lot of us. And right now, he's the best tight end in football. So.
Yeah, he is, although I didn't quite predict it to that extent. Gronk seems to be nowhere right now.
Yeah. So let's look at the Redskins and the Giants. Look at Alex Smith. So in 3 weeks, he's had 2 touchdown passes per game. In the other 3 games total, he's only had 1. Most of his receiving core is injured. And the Skins' formula for success is really starting to take shape, and that is this: run the ball and play good defense. So he's playing the Giants that are solid against the pass. They allow the 16th fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, they did trade away cornerback Apple and a defensive lineman. With that said, I think it's still better to start Smith. I think he's a game manager is really his role. Again, very similar to what he had there for many years in San Francisco and Kansas City. Eli Manning. So against a bad Atlanta defense last week, he threw for 399 yards and a touchdown, but those numbers are deceiving. He didn't look good, and he hasn't looked good. The Skins allowed the 10th most points to quarterbacks, but if you look at it, it's really only Drew Brees that lit them up, honestly. And so I think I would sit Eli Manning. I just don't trust him at all. As far as running backs go, Saquon Barkley, you need to start him as a running back 1 stud. Don't even think twice about it, just start him. And then there's Adrian Peterson. So in 4 of 6 games, he's been really good. He's got a 4.3 yards per carry this year, and that's improving. I would start as a low-end running back too, but I think you need to remember this is not the Adrian of his 20s. So I think he's a good play out there. I don't think he's a great play. Then there's Chris Thompson. You need to watch the injury report. Today, nothing new has come out to say or indicate whether or not he's going to play. So I'll have to watch Friday, Saturday, maybe even Sunday morning to see what he does. If he plays, you need to start him. He's a stud running back in PPR leagues. Now, with the wide receiver cert for the Skins, somebody's got to get those targets. Not only are those wide receivers hurt, but they're really ineffective, honestly. And so if Chris Thompson plays, you need to play him in PPR leagues as a running back 2 or flex. He had 26 catches through 4 games. He was on pace for 104 catches through 16 games. So he's a guy that's got huge value in PPR leagues. Odell Beckham started as a wide receiver 1. That's a no-brainer. And then Sterling Shepard started as a wide receiver 3. He's very underrated. I really like him. And then there's the Redskins receivers. Now, once again, I did say they traded away the cornerback Apple is gone, but those wide receivers are banged up. They're not performing well. They simply aren't good. I would sit until they get healthy and begin to prove that they can be trusted or start producing. As far as the tight ends go, Jordan Reed has disappointed. He's seen a drop in production the last 3 weeks. Playing the Giants allow the 10th fewest points to tight ends. The tight end position is thin, like we previously mentioned. So you probably have to start this guy, but I would start him outside the top 10. If you have better options in place, try to start them. Sit Vernon Davis. Vernon Davis, only start him if Reed were to be out or miss time. That's where his value is at. And then Evan Ingram said he had to have a prove-it game. He did come back. He was healthy. He looks fine. Those stats are going to come around. I would start him this week. I like Evan Ingram. He's very talented. As far as kickers go, I'd start both kickers, Rosas and Hopkins, and I would sit both defenses in this game.
All right, I like that. Sounds good. One interesting thing that you were talking about with sorry, blanking a little bit, but Alex Smith, he's just really impressed me there. And with the weapons that he's had in Washington, haven't been great, but he is definitely getting the job done. I'm surprised that they're competing for winning that division right now. It's just really impressive.
It really is a record. They've done well. I think a lot of it's their defense, not turning the ball over. They're just playing smart football. They're not doing anything great. They're just doing a lot of things well.
And I heard somewhere, this was before last week's game, so I don't know if this is still true, but Adrian Peterson, at least before, was on pace for a 1,000-yard season. That's crazy.
It is, yeah. I mean, the guys turned back the hands of time, I guess.
All right. All right, so now we look at the Cleveland Browns versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. We look at Baker Mayfield. He's an average fantasy start. He goes against Pittsburgh, who gives up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. On top of that, Pittsburgh is a very good offense, right? They're going to force Cleveland to score points. So I think that if you're looking for a guy to just fill in for a week, Baker Mayfield might be a good option, of course, depending on who else is out there. He's got some good talents around him, and of course, they're going to force him to throw the ball. They're going to force him to score points, and so I like that. On the other side, Ben Roethlisberger, he's got the second most passing yards per game this season. I think he's had, four games with over 300 yards passing. He looks great. Of course, he's got all these awesome weapons. I don't think there's really any concerns with Ben Roethlisberger. If you have him, start him unless you happen to have a better quarterback, which I assume you don't. We go to the running backs now. Look at Nick Chubb. Pittsburgh gives up the second fewest fantasy points to running backs, but he's still the sole starter, and he still looked impressive. I think you got to play him as an RB2 or a flex play, unless you happen to have a lot of depth at running back, which again is very dependent on your situation. I think that Chubb is still worth a start this week. We look at James Conner. Bell is still not going to play in this coming week. We thought that he was going to return, but he's still holding out for whatever reason. And so James Conner is a great start. He's got 220 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 5.5 yards per carry over the last 2 weeks. He has been lighting it up. James Conner looks great. On top of that, Cleveland gives up the 10th most points to running backs this season, so James Conner is a must start. We go to the wideouts now for Cleveland. Jarvis Landry is another guy you should definitely start. He's a PPR stud that has had at least 10 targets in all but one game this season, and he goes against Pittsburgh, who gives the 4th most points to wide receivers, so I really like Jarvis Landry. As far as the other wide receivers on that team go, Antonio Callaway or whatever that Aldrich Bourne guy is, I don't like any other wide receivers on that team. They haven't been very impressive. A lot of them have yet to find the end zone or yet to have a 100-yard game. They don't look great, so outside of Jarvis Landry, I'm going to avoid the Browns receivers. Of course, Antonio Brown is a must start. He's had 2 straight games with 100 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns in 6 games this year. I mean, it's Antonio freaking Brown. You're going to start him if you have him. You're also going to start Juju Smith-Schuster. In 4 of 6 games this season, he has 111 plus receiving yards. He is almost equally as good as Antonio Brown as far as fantasy value goes. So they are both must starts. It's not a lot. It's not very often that I get to talk about 2 receivers on the same team who you absolutely must start, but this is one of those cases. I'd be shocked if you had the talent to keep one of them on your bench. We'll move on now to tight ends. David Njoku, he scored a touchdown in back-to-back weeks. Pittsburgh gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends. And again, Cleveland's probably going to be forced to score quite a bit to keep up with that Steelers offense. So I like David Njoku, especially at, again, a position that doesn't have a lot of talent. I think he's a good start this week. I like him. On the other side, Vance McDonald and Jesse James, I just don't see a lot of value in them. I'm not going to play them. I think that they split a lot. They each kind of finish most games. It'll be like 2 or 3 catches and 20, 30 yards. They're just not great. We look at the kickers. I'm going to bench both kickers, Greg Joseph and Chris Boswell. I don't like either of them. They just haven't been kicking well and haven't had a lot of opportunities to kick. As far as the defenses go now, talk about the Steelers defense. They're getting after the quarterback. They're first forcing turnovers, and they've scored 2 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. I like the Steelers defense. They're going against Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield has been slightly impressive this year. He has been better than I expected as far as his play goes, but he's still a rookie quarterback, and they're still getting after the quarterback, and they're still forcing turnovers, and I don't think that Baker Mayfield is going to be immune to that. So I think that Steelers defense is a good play this week. And then we go to Cleveland on the other side. Pittsburgh gives up the 5th fewest points to opposing defenses, and so I don't like Cleveland's defense this week. They don't turn over the ball a whole lot, and they're a very good offense, and so sit Cleveland, start Steelers defense.
All right, sounds good. So look at the Panthers versus the Ravens. Cam Newton, so he plays the Ravens, give up the 2nd fewest points to quarterbacks. That Ravens defense is playing better and better. Now, the last 5 games, he's had 11 touchdown passes. Plus, on the season, he's at 257 rushing yards and add on 3 additional 3 rushing touchdowns. I won't say that he's a quarterback that's matchup proof. He's almost as close as you get because of his legs and ability to run the ball there. I think it keeps him as a pretty safe play. The reason why I can't say he's matchup proof, last week the Eagles were 11 minutes away from shutting them out before he made a crazy comeback and ended up beating the Eagles there. I would definitely start him. I think there is some risk playing the Ravens defense that is playing really well right now, but I think he's a guy that you definitely should start. Joe Flacco. So the Ravens' way is simple. Run the ball, play good defense. Now, he's got some good matchups coming up where I would start Joe Flacco. I think it's better to sit him in this game if you can afford to do that. Now, he's playing the Panthers to give up the 14th most points to quarterbacks, but I still think that it would be better to look elsewhere and not trust Joe Flacco. As far as running backs go, Javarius Allen. So with Al Collins playing, I guess, a little bit better, I would say he's playing great. And he's a better running back than Allen for sure. So Allen's role has really been reduced to passing situations. I would sit him unless you're in a PPR league and you're desperate for a running back 3 or flex. But honestly, I think there's better to look somewhere else for different options if you can do that. Alex Collins playing the Panthers. They give up the 8th fewest points to running backs. Got some goal line carries recently. The yardage totals are concerning for me. I don't know why the yards aren't there. They're just simply not. I would start him in standard leagues as a running back 2 or 3 in large leagues, but he's not a good play this week. Christian McCaffrey started as a high-end running back 2 in PPR leagues because his ability to catch the ball in the backfield, he's got a huge value there. He's right in that bubble of a running back 1, but I'd say he's a running back 2 in PPR leagues. Now, the Ravens give up the fewest points to running backs. So in standard leagues, you got to bump him down to about a running back 3 or flex play. As far as wide receivers go, I got Devin Funchess. He's had 3 touchdowns in 3 weeks. He's a solid receiver, but not a very exciting receiver. And so facing the Ravens, I give up the 3rd fewest points to wide receivers. For me this week, Funchess is a wide receiver 4. He could be a wide receiver 3 if you're in your league that are over 12 teams. Then maybe you could fall into that category there. As far as John Brown goes, both him and Crabtree have some great matchups coming up here. In fact, I traded for Crabtree simply due to his matchups. This week, though, is not one of those great matchups. And so for me, Brown is a wide receiver 3 and Crabtree is a wide receiver 4. It's better to sit Crabtree this week. I would start John Brown. I would sit the Ravens tight end. As far as Greg Olsen goes, he came back, he did play, he got a touchdown. He had 5 targets in that game. It's hard in this position to find quality, like we have mentioned a few times. With his pedigree and the lack of weapons that they have, you got to start him. He's playing the Ravens, actually give the 14th most points to tight end, so I would start Greg Olsen. I would start both kickers, Tucker and Gano. Tucker's as good as they get. I can't believe he missed an extra point last week. That's just unheard of for him, but you can trust him. Now I would start the Ravens and the Ravens defense. The Panthers defense, you could start as a low-end defensive play if you're in a pinch. Once again, I would start the Ravens defense. You could start the Panthers as a low-end play. Keep your expectations lower. So.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said about Michael Crabtree. I think sometimes we come on here and somebody is like, you guys are robotic, you just get to the point, you got all these stats, and first of all, we appreciate the compliment, but some people want to enjoy fantasy and just have fun and mess around. They think that you can't do that. You can make trades, you can get excited, but then also, like, just be honest with yourself. You can be excited about Michael Crabtree and still identify the fact that this is just not going to be a great week for him.
So I'm going to say this, okay, we've kind of figured out what our channel is, and what it is information. We get to the point. People that want to have fun, we're not going to do skits. I'm not going to do weird things like that. That's not my thing. But you know what's fun?
Winning.
Winning's fun. That's it. Win your league, that's fun. So that's what I think matters, and hopefully we're helping you guys win. What's that?
Playing in leagues with us, because we're the worst. All right, but yeah, I completely agree with everything you said in that game. It'll be a fun defensive match to watch. All right, so now we look at the Colts and the Raiders, and I believe back-to-back. I believe you have this game
I have back-to-back ones, yes. I got this game. So I'll get right into it there. We'll look at Andrew Luck. This guy's had 15 touchdowns the last 4 games. This guy's on fire. Averaging over 300 passing during those same 4-game stretch, starting against the Raiders, a team that's falling apart. They're rebuilding for the future. And so that's a mess. You got to start Andrew Luck. In fact, this guy might end up #1 quarterback at the end of the year because of a combination of one, just their bad defense, and he's very good. Derek Carr, he's only had 1 good game this year. The other 5, he's had 3 touchdown passes to 6 interceptions. Amari Cooper is gone now. I would sit him. You can't trust him. And I like Derek Carr. I hope that he rebounds a little bit, but right now that whole team is a mess. As far as running backs go, Marlon Mack has exploded the last 2 weeks. 215 total rushing yards, 3 TDs. Start him as a running back too. Doug Martin. So he's going to be taking over Marshawn Lynch that went on the IR. This guy has not impressed. He's averaging 2.99 yards per carry over his last 309 attempts spanning 2016 and 2018 seasons. He might be worth a bench stash simply because he is going to get that opportunity to carry. He could rebound, surprise a lot of us. Maybe he does what Adrian Peterson does and turns back the hands of time. So I think he's worth putting on your bench. He is not somebody that you need to trust. He needs to show something first. Then there's Jalen Richard in this one. Very good pass catching back. Starting PPR leagues as a running back too, in large leagues or as a flex. Once again, Jalen Richard is very valuable in PPR leagues, doesn't have a lot of value in standards. As far as wide receivers go, T.Y. Hilton, we told you last week to start him. We hope you listened to us. Playing the Raiders, give up the 9th most points to wide receivers. Last week he returns in a blowout, manages 2 touchdowns, started as a high-end wide receiver 2. And there's Chester Rogers. I would start as a wide receiver 3 in this matchup here for that. And there's Jordy Nelson. Is going to get more targets now that Cooper's gone. So you could look at one way, he's going to get more targets, but like you mentioned in a video that we just did recently, he's going to face the #1 corner. So it's kind of a trade-off there. And so I think he's a guy that It'd probably be better, I think, with everything that's going on there with the Raiders. That team is a mess. They hear there's turmoil on the inside. It's hard to figure out exactly what's going on. I think I'd probably lean towards sitting him until we see how this week goes. And there's Martavis Bryant. He's an intriguing sleeper, but he's a guy that you can't start this week. Why didn't you see what they do? As far as tight ends go, I would start Jared Cook. Cooper is gone. Lynch is out, and the Colts give up the 8th most points to tight ends. I like Jared Cook in this one. And then there's Doyle and Ebron. So Doyle returned to practice Wednesday. We don't know whether or not he's going to play. Frank Wright said this: Doyle will have a chance to play this week in Oakland. Our take on it would be if Doyle returns, I would sit him. We need to see what the target distribution is going to be before you trust him. So if he returns, I would start Ebron as a tight end 2. If Doyle sits, start Ebron as a tight end 1. Ebron's looked really good there. I would sit Adam Vinatieri. He's got a good matchup, but he's dealing with a groin injury. I would sit the Oakland's kicker. I would sit Oakland. I would start Indy's defense against Oakland, give the 5th most points to defenses. So there's a lot of information. I think I talked fast there.
That is a lot of information, but I like it. Andrew Luck is insanely on fire. I think a lot of people were just wondering, is Andrew Luck legit? He had one good season, and then we just haven't seen things from him. He's been injured, and he has been on fire lately with what I would call, honestly, a bad receiving corps, a bad offensive line, just a bad team. He seems very legitimate as a very good, honestly, a great NFL quarterback. So I like him. On the other side, this has nothing to do with fantasy, but what the heck is up with the Raiders? They give John Gruden this long 10-year contract, and I think he's taking full advantage of it. He's doing the full 76ers trust the process. He's just dumping all the talent. They have 3 first-round picks in 2019. So, yeah, that's just crazy. You know, they got rid of their best defensive player, and then other than Derek Carr, probably their best offensive player, and we'll see how things go. Maybe they'll turn things around, but it's an absolute mess right now. I'd say, you know what, pretty much want to start anyone who's playing against Oakland.
Yeah. By the way, I'll sell for our next group we talk about here. Sorry. I think they're doing the right thing. They could tweak a little bit here and there, maybe won a few games, but that is a team that's obviously not going to win a championship, and isn't that really the goal? So might as well gut the team, do it right, rebuild. So I know it's hard for Raiders fans. I know it's frustrating to see your team fall apart like that, but I think long term they're going to be better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That had nothing to do with fantasy, so let's get back to it.
Yeah.
So I think, unfortunately, you're up for a third game in a row.
Third game in a row. So we'll look at the Packers and Rams. Aaron Rodgers. He's got a tough play against a Rams defense, allowing the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks, but they're going to need to throw to keep up with the Rams. That Rams offense is virtually unstoppable at this point, plus the Packers defense is not good. I think that the Packers just have a hard time staying committed to the run. I don't know why they love to throw the ball. He's had back-to-back weeks of throwing over 400 yards. He's having a typical Rodgers dominance year again. He's just doing great. 12 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback. Also helps he's going to be getting Allison and Cobb back in this one. So he's a guy that you need to start. Start Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be great this week. There's Jared Goff. I would start against Green Bay, who give up the 11th fewest points to quarterbacks. He's a solid play. If there's any downside to Jared Goff this year, it's this. They've blown some teams out, which means they don't have to throw as much. And Todd Gurley's rushing touchdowns are lowering his value. I think right now Todd Gurley has 14 touchdowns on the year, 11 rushing touchdowns. So that's hurting some of his value there, but I think you can still start him as a solid play. As far as running backs go, do I need to tell you to start Todd Gurley? He is matchup proof. He's on pace for 32 touchdowns and over 2,185 total yards. This guy is phenomenal. Got to play Todd Gurley. In fact, if I got to tell you that and you weren't sure what to do, you should probably just hang it up and stop playing football, fantasy football. So, then you got Jamal Williams. I think he's going to be used more in this game. The coaches really like the fact that he's good in pass protection, but his production and the targets simply aren't there. I would sit Jamal Williams. And there's Aaron Jones. Unfortunately, in this game, they're going to need to throw the ball a lot, and that doesn't bode well for Jones, who he often will sit the bench and Williams comes out because, like I said, the coaches like Williams better in pass protection. So Jones is a good running back. He's having a very good year running the ball, just not getting enough carries. I think in this one, his carries will be low again, so he's a running back 3. And there's Ty Montgomery. I see Ty Montgomery having an expanded role in this one here. He could be started in deep leagues that are PPR. I think he has some sleeper appeal in this one, but he's not a solid play per se. Let's go to wide receivers. Robert Woods with Cooper Kupp most likely out again. I think they'd be foolish to rush him back. Their star young wide receiver stud. They're going to sit him out one more game with that MCL sprain. Woods is a very good wide receiver 2 start. Same with Brandon Cooks. Another great wide receiver 2 there. I would say that Brandon Cooks is better in standards and Woods has more value in PPRs if you're looking at that, if it matters to you. Cooper Kupp's progressing well. They're saying that he's looking good in his rehab, but I doubt that he's going to come back this week. And if he does come back, I think the team's going to err on the side of caution. I think I would sit Kupp one more week there just to make sure. Then there's Davante Adams. He's got a tough matchup facing a defense that does not allow a lot of points to wide receivers, but he's a stud wide receiver must start. He's getting high targets, yards, TDs. They'll be playing from behind. It's very conceivable he could get 15 to 16 targets well within reach. Start Davante Adams. Now you're going to get Allison and Cobb back. Can you start one of those guys? Well, Cobb, before the injury, he was trending down. He had some drops, some fumbles, missed blocking assignments, and Allison had been playing better, taking away some of his volume there. So it's really hard to tell in this game who's going to get the snaps and the targets. I think of the two between Cobb and Allison, I think Cobb is a safer play being the veteran. So I think you could start him as a wide receiver 3-4 depending on your league size and scoring. Allison, before the injury, he was trending upwards, looking better and better. He's young, he's talented, but he needs to be ahead of Cobb on the depth chart to really be trusted at this point. So I want to see the usage before I can trust Allison in this one. As far as tight ends go, I would start Jimmy Graham. Rams give up the 10th most points to tight ends. I would sit the Rams tight ends. I would start both Crosby and Greg Zuerlein, who came back. The guy's going to have a phenomenal year from this point forward. Sit Green Bay's defense. You can start the Rams defense, but I think that they have much lower value this week facing Rodgers. And so once again, Rodgers is a guy that's only had one interception all year. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He's a smart quarterback. Probably better to avoid starting the Rams defense. So.
Exactly.
So I think you're up. I'm out of wind.
Fine. All right, so here we come now to the Cardinals 49ers game. This is the battle of the toilet bowl quarterbacks, pretty much. We got backup quarterback C.J. Beathard and rookie quarterback Josh Rosen playing each other. Neither are impressive. Now, some of you will have to start him. You mentioned it in our last video that there are some people who are playing in 2 quarterback leagues. You said that some of you were talking to somebody who is in a 16-team 2 quarterback league. That means every quarterback who starts that week is getting started. That is absolutely insane. And so, yeah, at some point these guys are going to get started. But I tell you what, try to avoid it at all costs. C.J. Beathard hasn't been great. He plays the Cardinals, who give up the 9th least fantasy points to quarterbacks, so that's not great. And then you say Josh Rosen, the last time they played each other, Josh Rosen completed only 47% of his passes for 170 yards and a touchdown. He just hasn't looked great. He has yet to throw for more than 1 touchdown pass in any of his starts all season. I'm not a huge fan of either of these guys, to be honest, and so I'm going to say sit them if you can. However, a few of you watching, a few of you will need to start them, and so unfortunately that's the case. We move on now to the running backs. Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert. Now, Matt Breida is currently questionable. I think he's going to play, right? That's how it seems to be. If he doesn't play, Raheem Mostert might be a good play. He might be a good option. He's been all right lately, and the Cardinals give up the most fantasy points to running backs. But if Matt Breida does play, I'm not going to start Raheem because I think Matt Breida, he is the better running back, and I think he is the guy. However, I don't know what to think right now because he might not play. He is banged up, and he hasn't played amazing. Cardinals do give up the most fantasy points to running backs, and so this is kind of a toss-up where it is almost 100% dependent on what does your other running back situation look like. It's not a great running system right there. It's not a great offense as far as that goes. But also, if you're desperate or whatever, he might be a guy you have to play. And so this is honestly, and I hate to just throw it up there, is 100% dependent on what your running backs look like. We go to the other side now, David Johnson. David Johnson struggled all year. He has found the end zone 6 times despite a yards per carry of 3.2. I think that comes down to that bad offense, although San Francisco has only allowed 1 running back to rush for more than 62 yards. Only 1 running back have they allowed to rush for more than 62 yards, and David Johnson has yet to combine for more than 72 yards all season. Combined, rushing and receiving. He just hasn't been productive. He's you talked about LeGarrette Blount. He is touchdown dependent as far as his fantasy value goes. And so I'm going to look elsewhere, and hopefully I was smart in the draft. I've been smart in free agency, and hopefully I've got backups for him because I'm not a big fan of him right now. I don't think this is going to be a good week for him. I don't know if you agree with that. I know David Johnson's a big name, and that's kind of a bold opinion a lot of people aren't going to be happy with, but it's just a sad truth. There are only so many weeks he can find the end zone when he's not getting yards and he's not producing elsewhere. We look now at the wide receivers. Marquise Goodwin. He had a huge game 2 weeks ago, but he's been held to 30 yards or fewer in each of the other 4 games that he's played in. He's not a great option. I wouldn't want to play him or Pierre Garçon or Trent Taylor or Kendrick Bourne or however you say that. I'm not a huge fan of, honestly, any of the receivers in that offense with the backup quarterback there. We look on the other team, Christian Kirk. He's leading the Cardinals receivers for yards and receptions, but he's still only averaging 8 fantasy points a game. I think Christian Kirk is a good wide receiver, but he's a rookie. I think it's going to take time until that quarterback play gets better, that he'll be a very good fantasy option. So I don't like Christian Kirk, and honestly, I don't like Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald, poor guy, is having a rough year. He is on pace for 510 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's his pace for the end of the year. That's awful. I can't see myself starting either of those guys, to be honest, and I feel bad because I like Larry Fitzgerald and I want to put him out there, but I just can't do it. George Kittle, he's had 3 of the last 4 games have been his highest yardage games. Since C.J. Beathard took over, he has scored both of his touchdowns. In fact, he's played even better and been more impressive since Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. And so I'm going to say start George Kittle. I was surprised to find that out. Although Arizona gives up the 6th fewest fantasy points to tight ends, they've played against okay competition. Burton and Reed and Rudolph are some of the best tight ends they've played. I think you got to start Kittle because the tight end position is shallow. And again, it surprised me to find out that he has actually played better since Jimmy Garoppolo stopped, since he got hurt and hasn't been in the lineup. So that's interesting. On the other end, we see Ricky Seals-Jones. Jones has had 6 the last time Cardinals played the 49ers, he had 6 targets for 0 catches, 0 yards, 0 touchdowns. He did nothing on his 6 targets. So I'm going to bench Ricky Seals-Jones. They seem to be, it seems to be a tough matchup for them. It seems to shut him down, do well against tight ends. As far as the kickers go, I'm going to sit Phil Dawson. He's been awful. I'm going to start Robbie Gould. He's all or nothing, and I think this week could be an all week. Last time they played Arizona, he had 0 points, and then the very next game against Green Bay, he had 15, so he's all over the place. It's a very risky start, but I'm leaning towards that this could be a good week for him. I think so. And then San Francisco's defense is just brutal, but Arizona gives up the 2nd most fantasy points to defenses. So if you're in a tough spot and a pinch in a tight position, you could throw them in your lineup, but I'm going to say avoid it. And then Arizona, I like Arizona. They got 22 sacks, 13 turnovers, and 2 touchdowns in just 7 games. They also play the 49ers, who give up the 3rd most fantasy points to defenses. So I'd start Arizona's defense. I think it should be a good week for them.
All right. The Vikings and the Saints, good game to watch Sunday night. If you have time to sit down and watch a game, this would be a nice, entertaining game to watch. Let's start with the quarterback, Kirk Cousins, playing New Orleans, get the 2nd most points to quarterbacks. You need to start him. On the year, he's averaging over 300 passing yards per game. He's got 14 touchdown passes, and only 3 interceptions. Go ahead and start him. Then you got Drew Brees. Now, Minnesota's playing better on defense, but they've been vulnerable against the pass. Now, Xavier Rhodes might miss the game due to an injury. Drew Brees is a Hall of Famer. I would start Drew Brees in this one. Let's look at running backs. Mark Ingram. He's got a yards per carry 3.0 this year. That's not good. Now, the first 2 years in the league, he struggled. Last 2, he kind of blew up. I wonder how much of that production was aided by PEDs. Honestly, it's just a question I have to have there. Or maybe a struggle yards per carry wise. That production is simply a matter of him need to get into a groove, get back into playing shape. I don't know. But he's not nearly as good a running back as Alvin Kamara is, obviously. So for me, he's a running back 3, a bubble play for flex positions against a strong Vikings front 7 there. You could start him, but I have some concerns about it. So if you can go look elsewhere, I would encourage you to do that. Alvin Kamara. Don't worry about the week 1 hiatus. I know when Ingram came back, everybody panicked. A lot of people traded him away. I don't know what you were thinking. We told you not to do that. Here's what happened in that game. It was a blowout, so they rested their star, who through the first 4 weeks had a heavy workload there. He's a must start. And even if they clog the running lanes, this guy is so good in the passing situation or in passing game that he's just used so many different ways. He's huge. You got to start Alvin Kamara. Now, Dalvin Cook, reports are coming out today from ESPN reporter Courtney Cronin that sounds like he's going to be out through the Week 10 bye. They're probably going to sit him. It's about time they did it. Give him a few weeks, get him healed up. So Cook is not going to play. Even if he happened to play, I do not see that happening. He needs to have a prove-it game. Stay away from him. Latavius Murray has had 2 weeks of improved play after struggling early on. Now he plays New Orleans, allowed the 3rd fewest points to running backs, but he's a clear-cut running back 1 on that offense. Therefore, he needs to be considered. I would start him as a low-end running back 2 in fantasy. Wide receivers go Michael Thomas. If Xavier Rhodes is out or limited, I would start him as a wide receiver 1. If Xavier Rhodes plays and he's good to go, then I would say that Thomas is still a solid play, but as a wide receiver 2. As far as Traquan Smith, he's taken over in 2 wide receiver sets with Ted Ginn Jr. on the IR, and he's ahead of Cameron Meredith in those sets. And so he's a very talented wide receiver who struggled early in the year, learning the playbook, and because of it, he didn't see a lot of snaps on the field, but he's understanding the playbook. He's getting more time on the field there. He's looking better and better. He's very talented. I would start as a wide receiver 3. Cameron Meredith, I would sit in. Playing the Vikings will give the 7th fewest points to wide receivers. Right now, Smith is ahead of him on the depth chart, so I would sit him. As far as Stephon Diggs go, New Orleans give the most points to wide receivers. Now, they did trade for Eli Apple, but it's going to take a while for him to get there and probably help that team. Start Stephon Diggs as a wide receiver 2, and then Adam Thielen start as a wide receiver 1. This guy is matchup proof. 7 games he's had, 7 100-yard games. The guy's just amazing, so I'll go ahead and start him. In fact, he's looking for an NFL record this week. If he can break that, I hope he does it. Like the guy. Of course, being a Vikings fan, that's easy to say. But he's a great story anyways. Tight ends go Watson. I would start him. He's playing Minnesota, give the 7th most points to tight ends. If you can sit Rudolph, I would do that. In the preseason, we said that Rudolph is overrated. Now he's playing the Saints. I give the 4th fewest points to tight ends. He's only got 2 touchdowns on the year. He's only averaging 4 catches of 40 yards per game. So if you can afford to sit Rudolph, I would do that. I would start Lutz and Bailey at kicker, and I would sit both defenses. If you had to start a defense in this one, it'd be the Vikings playing at home, but I would prefer to sit them. So.
All right, I completely agree with all that. That's going to be a fun game to watch, although I'm afraid it'll be a little bit heartbreaking. All right, so now we come to the Patriots-Bills game. For starters, this should be a pretty one-handed game. I imagine the Patriots are going to take over. You got to start Tom Brady. He's had 4 3-touchdown games. In 2 of the last 3 games, he's thrown for over 340 yards. He's looked great. On the other hand, you look at the Buffalo Bills situation at quarterback. Don't start either of them. We talked about how bad Blake Bortles has been and how he lost his job recently. He lost his job with a quarterback rating of 80.3. To put in perspective how bad Nathan Peterman is, his season quarterback rating is 16.7. That's awful. We look at Derek Anderson. He had 4 turnovers last game, did not score a touchdown, and only had 175 yards passing. Neither of those quarterbacks are even close to worth it. James White is an absolute must start this week, especially in PPR leagues. He is on pace for, he has had 61 targets, 45 catches, 7 touchdowns, 6 of which are receiving. So far this year, that's not his pace. That's what he's had through 7 games. He is so dominant and so effective. On top of that, Buffalo gives up the 9th most points to running backs, so you must start James White. Kenjon Barner, you should start him if and only if Sony Michel does not play. Now, Sony Michel looks like he isn't going to play, so I probably would start him, but then it also very much depends on who else do you have. Do you have some other good options, right? Do you have some depth at running back? To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Kenjon Barner, but if you were leaning on Michel, if he was a must start for you, if he was one of your starting running backs and you were very dependent on him, then you're probably going to have to go with Barner. You're probably going to have to throw him in your lineup. We look at the other side, LaShawn McCoy and Chris Ivory. I'm going to sit both of them. McCoy is marked as questionable. Excuse me there. He's marked as questionable with a head injury. We know how the NFL is lately. He may or may not play, but they're probably going to try to sit him if they can. Chris Ivory, after McCoy left versus the Colts, had 16 carries for 81 yards and 3 receptions for 25 yards. So he did look impressive last game, but that was against a bad Colts defense. Keep in mind he's averaging 2.5 yards per carry this season. I just won't bother with either of them if I can avoid it. Josh Gordon. I like Josh Gordon. I take a shot on him if I can. He had his first 100-yard receiving game with the Patriots last week. Brady absolutely needs him to perform. Josh Gordon is no more than a wide receiver 3, but he does have high upside. I like him. The Bills give up the 4th least fantasy points to receivers this season, but that's not necessarily because of how dominant that defense is. I think it is a little bit underrated, but a lot of that comes down to just the fact that most of the Bills games are low scoring because that offense can't do squat. Julian Edelman, he's had touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. He's Brady's #1 option. However, he will probably be facing the #1 cornerback in Tre'Davious White. And again, the Bills give up the 4th least fantasy points to receivers this season. So keep that in mind and temper your expectations with Edelman. We'll move on now. Some of the other guys, Chris Hogan, Philip Dorsett, Cordero Patterson, just bench all of them. I don't think that they have any value, to be honest with you. We go to the other side. The only 2 receivers worth mentioning are Calvin Benjamin and Zay Jones. Zay Jones' best game this season was 8 targets, 3 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown. Calvin Benjamin's best game was 5 targets, 4 catches, 71 yards, and 0 touchdowns. I mean, those are their best games. Like, that is their peak. I don't think that you can honestly trust starting either of them. So I'm going to say probably sit them if you can. Gronkowski has not had 100 yards or a touchdown since week 1. This is a tough one. Like, I don't know what to say. Rob Gronkowski, how can you not start him with how dominant he's been in the past, with how little talent there is at the tight end position? He is questionable, and he missed last week due to a back injury. He really seems to be struggling with his back injury every season. I don't know if you have anything to add to this, Rob, but that's a tough call to make. It really is, based on me. I'm going to be looking for another option. I'm going to try to find another guy to plug and play this week. But
well, here's the concern that we have. Okay, so reports are, it sounds like he's going to play Monday night. And a lot of people out there are going to need to play him. Here's the problem with that, though, on a Monday night game. Let's say you're ready to roll with him, and then all of a sudden, pregame a couple hours before, they don't play him. Well, now you missed your window to start other tight ends. So you're going to have to make that decision early. It puts you kind of in a pinch. And so it's probably better for you to err on the side of caution. If I'm the Patriots, why risk Gronkowski in a game that you're not going to need him to beat the Bills?
Yeah, exactly. Then we go to the other side, Charles Clay. He's yet to find the end zone this year at all, and he's yet to have a single game where he has received for more than 40 yards. He's a must-sit. Stephen Gostkowski, he's the model of consistency. There's no reason not to start him. He's playing for that Patriots offense. They're gonna do what they want against that defense. They're gonna score touchdowns. He gets extra point. Once they're leading, he's gonna kick field goals to help continue that lead. I like Gostkowski this week. Don't play kicker Steven Hushka. The Patriots, Buffalo gives it the most fantasy points to defenses, and Patriots are also averaging 2 turnovers a game plus a touchdown and a block punt last week, so you must start the Patriots defense. I like them a lot. And then don't play the Bills defense. They're just not very good right now as far as fantasy-wise go, and so that's a pretty brief ran through kind of quickly there, but that is the Bills-Patriots, who you should start and sit.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. Do us a favor. Like, comment, share the videos. It means a lot. Wish you the best. Hope you're having a good fantasy season. God bless and take care.